Hey guys, hope you're well. It's Tolomic here with DNB Academy, and today I want to look at writing memorable, catchy melodies and a couple of hacks that I use for those. Stuff like this is really subjective, so I'll try and give kind of broad advice and then show some examples, and we'll try writing a melody to this tune that we've got here. So I've got this outline of a tune. And we'll try and use this arp here. Sort of a distorted, plucky sound. I called it an arp because I've used it as an arp in the past. It's from my tune, Here You Are. But for this instance, it's not really going to be used as that. Okay, so one thing to note is that the whole key of this is in E flat minor. All the atmospheres on the bass line are in that key, so we need to make sure we're sticking to that. Cool, so let's start. So one thing to think about first is, one thing that I like to do anyway, is to keep our melody not landing on that first beat of the bar. I just find it sounds a little bit more interesting, and it kind of carries everything. On that first beat, you can have a load of impacts and hits and everything else. So if you're just delaying it a little bit, it can help that first note kind of stick out a little bit more. That doesn't always apply, and I know a lot of dancehall tunes, for example, will always have that one in like downbeat. Everything goes, and that's fine. And this also isn't a hard and fast rule, and that applies to everything I talk about today. It's just for this instance. Let's try nudging it off a bit. So the next is to think about intervals. So different intervals will give different feelings and different sounds. I suppose a little bit to the bassline tutorial I did recently, where I talked about kind of thinking about implied chords and things like that. This isn't quite as sort of strict as that, but it's something to kind of think about, is that you will get, major and minor kind of implications from tonality, not necessarily like implied chords, but like just the way it makes you feel. One that I find is really strong is a seventh. Can sound great. A fifth can work well as well. All other, that's not to say only use these two, but I find they can be quite strong if I'm struggling to picture a melody in my head. I find that can be a nice starting point. But, if we do a fourth, you could then that works, So let's start with the seventh. And from those two, these other intervals are literally just done by like a picture that melody in my head. And sometimes this might require like a bunch of replaying and moving around. I've kind of kept a consistent rhythm. That's sort of something that can work quite well. But regardless of how you go about it, that moves me on to my second tip, which is repetition. So I would then take all of this, copy, repeat on the next bar. And again, all of that, copy and repeat on the next bar. And this will be where we turn it around. So that fourth repetition, sometimes people will do it so the first and the second repeat. The second repeat is slightly different, and that acts as like an A, and then you have a B answer. Here we're doing A, B as our answer. What I mean by that is that if this phrase is A, we've then repeated that, so A again, and then we're going to twist it for B as like an answering phrase to keep it interesting. So let's try that. And let's see how that sounds with the turnaround as well, with everything. So let's go from the start. So maybe let's try that. Cool, so that sounds fine to me for now. As you kind of saw there, you can endlessly like tweak this. It's all a tasting. But the key things to make sure is that you've got repetition in your melody, and that the intervals like feel interesting. You know, you don't want to just have like a let's create a new bar here, something that's literally you know, that basically feels like an arpeggiator, just slower, because it's just going to be boring. Certainly not for your main melody. Those can work for counter melodies and that kind of thing. But another little trick that I would say is a helpful thing to have in your arsenal, so to speak, is to be modulating your lead a little bit, sort of as it goes. So with pluckier stuff like this, I've actually already got a macro set up, but if I sort of tweak it, it just kind of helps to, even though you've got that repetition in the melody, is that the sound is evolving over that phrase, that sort of 16 bar phrase. And you can always, like, you know, use that in build ups as well. So if we another little trick, and I'm slightly going on a tangent here, is that if you're evolving by opening up leads and plucks and things like that, is to put your delays at the end of the chain, so that when you're closing all your filters and everything's kind of being sucked down again, is the way that I kind of picture it in my head. But you're shortening all the decays and the filter frequencies, and you're ducking them down and everything to remove those high frequencies. You've got delays and reverbs at the sort of towards the end of your chain. The tail from the higher end sounds will linger over everything else. So you've still got that like ringing from those higher notes over the much more subdued notes later on. I find that sounds great, but that's a sort of separate thing. So there you go. There's 2 hacks. I use them all the time. I'm all about forcing ideas and inspiration. So sometimes it's not there, and rather than me just leaving the studio and being like, oh, I'm not going to do it today, you can use things like conscious thought to kind of brute force ideas out. Yeah, so there you go. Hope that was helpful. Any questions, let us know, and I'll see you in the next one.